All right, today we are jumping headfirst into a really fascinating and, frankly, viral identity myth. This is the idea that an ancient biblical people are actually the secret ancestors of modern Europeans. It's a huge claim with massive implications, so you know what? Let's just get right into the evidence.
So have you ever come across this online? The claim that the biblical figure Esau, who you'll also know as Edom, is the true ancestor of all modern white people? I mean, it's a theory that promises to unlock some kind of hidden history. But the big question is, what does the actual evidence have to say about it? Okay, to really get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow the evidence step by step. First up, we'll lay out exactly what this viral myth claims. Then we're going to meet the real historical Edomites. After that, we'll investigate their mysterious disappearance, see what the DNA says, and finally, and this is super important, we'll dig into the psychology of why a myth like this can be so powerful.
So let's start right there. What exactly is the claim we're looking at? This isn't just some fringe internet theory floating around. For a number of modern movements, this is actually a core belief.
Okay, so the core claim really boils down to two big ideas. First, that the people of Edom didn't just disappear after biblical times. And second, that they migrated all the way to Europe and became the ancestors of today's European populations. And as our sources show, this isn't just a historical curiosity. For some groups, this narrative is a key piece of their theology. They use it to interpret everything from scripture to modern-day geopolitics.
So to text a claim like that, you have to go back to the sources, right? We need to separate fact from fiction. Let's find out. Who were the actual historical Edomites according to both the Bible and the historical records we have? Well, the Bible gives us the origin story. It's an incredible family drama, right? Esau is Jacob's twin brother, which makes the Edomites and the Israelites brother nations. They're deeply related, but almost always in conflict. And what's amazing is that this isn't just a story. The historical record actually confirms that Edom was a real place. In fact, the earliest mention we have of Edom outside the Bible comes from an Egyptian document, the Papyrus Anastasis 6, and it places them right there in the Levant, at the right time, describing them as Semitic tribes. So history lines up with the biblical account here.
So the Edomites left a really clear historical footprint. We see them emerge in the late Bronze Age, and they go on to build a thriving kingdom during the Iron Age. They were major players, trading invaluable stuff like copper. But like so many kingdoms in the region, they eventually get conquered by the rising Babylonian Empire. Now after this, they don't just vanish, but they do change. They start being known by a new name. To the Greeks, they're the Idumeans, and they live in a region called Idumea.
And listen, this history isn't just based on old texts. We have physical proof. Archaeologists have literally dug up the material culture of the Edomites, things like this distinctive pottery. These kinds of artifacts give us a real, tangible connection to them. We can see their daily lives, their trade networks, their unique identity as a real people living in a specific time and place.
Okay, so this brings us to the central mystery, doesn't it? If Edom was a real, thriving kingdom, what happened to them? Where did they go? The modern myth we're looking at says they migrated. But the historical record? Well, it tells a very, very different and much more definitive story. See, history doesn't record any mass migration to Europe. Not at all. What it records is an absorption, and it happened right there in the Levant. So after they became known as Idumeans, they were conquered by the Jewish Hasmonean dynasty. And the ruler at the time, a guy named John Hyrcanus, did something really drastic. He forced the entire Idumean population to convert to Judaism. And within just a couple of generations, poof, they were completely assimilated. And the best part is, we don't even have to guess about this. We have a direct eyewitness account, more or less. The first-century Jewish historian Josephus, who was writing not long after all this went down, is crystal clear. He writes that after their forced conversion, the Idumeans were henceforth no other than Jews. That quote right there, that is effectively the historical death certificate for the Edomites as a distinct people. They didn't move away, they were absorbed into their brother nation, Israel. But wait a minute, what about science? Couldn't we just use genetics to trace these ancient bloodlines and figure it all out? Well, this is where the modern myth tries to wrap itself in the language of science, but it runs into a massive, fundamental problem. And that problem is something called anachronism. It's a huge error, and it's basically when you take a modern idea, like our concept of race, and you try to force it onto the past. Ancient peoples just did not think about ethnicity the way we do. For them, it was about culture, politics, and religion, not some kind of biological bloodline that you could track for thousands of years. And you know what? Modern genetics totally backs this up. Studies of ancient DNA from the Levant show that all these groups,
The Canaanites, the Israelites, the Edomites, they were all part of a shared regional gene pool. They were actually more genetically similar to each other than they were different. Today, both Jewish and Levantine Arab populations carry a mixture of this ancient ancestry. But here's the key: no single modern group is a pure one-to-one match for any single ancient one. The real story of human genetics is one of constant mixing, not perfectly preserved, separate bloodlines.
Okay, so if the history, the archaeology, and the genetics are all pointing in the same direction, why on earth does this myth about the Edomites still persist? Why is it so powerful? Well, this is where we have to shift gears a little and move from history to psychology.
Because the appeal of this story, it has nothing to do with evidence. It's all about meaning. See, these kinds of myths serve a really powerful purpose for the communities that believe in them. They're not trying to write a paper for a history journal. They're trying to explain their world and find their own place in it.
There's actually a term for this from scholars like Jan Assmann. It's called creating a symbolic enemy. And here's how it works. You take a real historical group like the Edomites, and you transform them into a timeless, almost mythical villain. And that villain becomes the go-to explanation for everything that's gone wrong in the world. It creates this incredibly powerful story of a cosmic struggle between good and evil.
And a myth like this is just so compelling because it makes a complicated world feel simple. It gives you a clear, identifiable bad guy to blame for all your problems. It takes all the modern struggles, social, political, economic, and it roots them in an ancient, divine, biblical story. And maybe most importantly, it gives you a powerful sense of a secret, revealed identity. The idea that you are the true chosen people, and now you finally know who your ancient enemy is. It's a story. And often, a powerful story can feel more true than a pile of facts.
All right, let's bring this all together. It's time for the final verdict. And to do that, we have to make a really clear distinction between the Edom of actual history and the Edom of myth and symbol. Now, if you remember one thing, make it this. There are two Edoms. The first one was a real historical people, a Semitic group from the Iron Age who lived, worshipped their god Kaus, practiced circumcision, and were eventually absorbed into the Jewish people. They're gone. The second Edom is a symbol. And believe it or not, this symbolic use started way back in antiquity. After the real Edomites were gone, Jewish writers started using Edom as a kind of code word for their new great enemy, the Roman Empire. It was a powerful symbol of an oppressor, a literary tool. It was never a genealogical claim. The modern myth tragically confuses the symbol with the reality.
So what's the bottom line from scholars? It's completely unanimous. There is zero credible, peer-reviewed scholarship that supports this idea. The claim that Edomites exist today, it's false. History is clear. They were absorbed. The claim that any modern group is Edom, also false. That's an anachronism, using an ancient label where it doesn't belong. And the claim that biblical prophecies point to a modern Edom, well, that's just a misreading of prophecies that were clearly aimed at ancient enemies in their own time, not modern nation.
Ultimately, the story of Edom is a perfect example of how ancient history can be dug up and totally repurposed to serve modern needs. It really forces us to draw a line between history, the complex, messy story of what actually happened, and myth, which is the powerful story we tell ourselves about who we are. And that leaves us with one final question to think about. What ancient stories, for better or for worse, are shaping your modern world?